Hey, everybody. Welcome to the First Look Film Festival, HBCU First Look Film Festival. I'm April Woodard, and I'm so excited tonight that we're going to have an opportunity to talk to a mover and shaker within the business, but who has a background at HBCUs at Norfolk State University. And so I would name him as a connector. He is a voiceover artist. He's an executive producer. He is a mover and shaker. He makes things happen. He's an influencer before there were influencers on social media, and he's also an influencer on social media. The executive producer of the Sherri Show, Jawn Murray. Hey, Jawn.
Going on, April? How are you?
I gave you my own introduction because you do so many things. It's hard to tap into all of them. Of course, award-winning, and you just got signed on, and Sherri just got renewed for another season, so season 3. So congratulations to you on that.
Thank you so much. We're excited. We were on vacation for 2.5 weeks. It was a working vacation for us because we were out on the road promoting the show and doing a bunch of media and stuff. But the beauty of the show is we got to connect with people who actually watch the show. And they say the most remarkable things to us about how, like there's a woman who said that she gets dialysis on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And so she scheduled her dialysis appointment around the airing of our show because while she's going through the worst thing in her life, we give her the necessary distraction that she needs. And we actually had a lady who in our studio audience today, I gifted her one of the items that she liked in the Sherri's pop-up shop, which is we show these products will sell. You can shop e-commerce for them. But she told me, she said, back in 2021, her daughter died during COVID. And she said, John, I was barely holding on by a thread. And she said, some days I'm still only holding on by a thread, but coming to your show at least once a week and sitting in the audience gives me such a sense of purpose and enjoyment. And I just thank you all for loving on me so much. And you just never know the impact that this little daytime show with all this fun, joy, and laughter and inspiration does for people. And it just gives us the drive that we need to keep going from day to day.
Well, I had an opportunity to attend, and it is an experience. It is just, there's no way you can go in that room and be upset because it's just joyful. Everybody is very happy and encouraging, and Sherri is just as funny and fun and embracing. And so I think you just kind of created a whole environment that really is welcoming and that goes through the television screen. And if you're able to, get into the studio, you feel that energy as well. So take me back. Let's go way back to when you started. You were always a grinder. You were always, working things out while you were in college, while you were in school, you were working things out. You were one of the youngest people on the Tom Joyner show. You had your own column while you still were in college. Talk to me about having that grind, because as a professor now, sometimes I wonder if our students have the same kind of grind that maybe some of the older graduates had. I know I see it in some of them, but not all of them. And tell me how important having that kind of being a go-getter is for somebody who wants to be in your industry.
For me, April, it went back further than college. Like I was a latchkey kid. So I would come home after school and TV was my babysitter. I'd come home after school and I'd watch Ricky Lake and Rolanda Watts and Oprah Winfrey and Sally Jesse Raphael. And it was something about these shows and the variety of stories and guests and the conflict and just all the things that were happening in daytime TV that intrigued me at a young age. I had no idea at that point I would end up working in a genre later in life, but I knew I wanted to work in entertainment. Like from the time I was a kid, I had an older aunt that used to babysit me, and she used to watch the old school shows. I Love Lucy and Leave It to Beaver. And I'll never forget, I really liked how funny and witty I Love Lucy was. And one of my favorite iterations of that show is when Lucy went to Hollywood. And so, maybe it was planting a seed that I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. So by the time I got to Norfolk State, I knew I wanted to work in entertainment. And listen, I had visions of myself going into entertainment and becoming a TV host. I loved personalities like Regis Philbin and Arsenio Hall, Montel Williams, and Tom Bergeron. And so I didn't want to learn any of the technical aspects of the communications department at Norfolk State. My professors there used to get frustrated at me because they'd be like, well, you need to learn how to work a camera. And I'd be like, why? I'm gonna be on the other side of the camera. Why would I learn to work a camera? In hindsight, I should have learned every aspect of what they were teaching me in school. But, I had a vision for what I wanted of this business. And so I started getting professional work while at Norfolk State. The whole .com boom was happening at the time. And it's amazing to live in a world now where we did not exist with internet and all things digital being so ubiquitous. But at the time, the internet was a casual luxury. It was not something that was a necessity. And but the growth of it was happening in a major way. And I was able to carve out a name for myself in the entertainment industry from the Charles Smith dorm at Norfolk State University. And so I came back to DC one spring, and I interned at a radio station, WPGC in Washington, DC. And it really helped refine me in the entertainment industry. It helped me understand networking. It helps me to understand building relationships. I built my first friendships with people that happened to be celebrities during my time at this station. And one of the things that made me a shining star as an intern was that because I did not grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth, I didn't have a lot of wealth. I knew I had to work harder than everybody else. And I had a circle of friends that were really talented. They were great musicians and great singers, and they had all these artistic skills that I didn't necessarily possess. But I had the drive and the tenacity to want to accomplish something in this business that may have just allowed me to stay a step ahead of those who are far more superior than me creatively and talented. And so I would study the business. I would absorb the business. I wanted to learn every aspect of the entertainment business. And so I would go to places like Barnes and Nobles and Borders Books and Music, and I'd read all the industry publications. And so when a music artist would come to the station, I could talk to them about their history and their stats and their albums. And back then we still had physical albums. So I would read the liner notes, and I could tell them what songwriter or producer wrote my favorite song and how this other song on the album that wasn't the single really spoke to me. And so I began to build these relationships with people, some of which I am still very close to this very day as an intern. And listen, I became so popular as the intern, April. Thea Mitchum, who was the assistant program director at the time, she's now the program director of Power 105 in New York, where everyone watches The Breakfast Club and sees that show on YouTube. But I remember Thea asking me if I was dealing drugs because so many of the music artists would come back to town and specifically ask if I could be assigned to them or if I could spend the day with them. And she was like, why does everybody love this intern so much? Why are they so drawn to you? And so that was my entree into the business. This internship helped me establish myself in the business. I began to create my own space and make my own waves in the business. And though TV was my ultimate goal, because I was a really good writer, it was writing that opened up the doors for me, that landed me an opportunity on the Tom Jordan Morning Show and made every other facet of my journey in the entertainment industry come into fruition.
Wow, that is incredible. That is a lot to unpack. But I want to hone in on one point that you made, and that is writing. Because I've actually been a professor for about 8 years now. And some of the feedback we get from people who want to hire our students is that they need to improve their writing skills. How important is writing to your everyday job now as, the EP of Sherri Shepherd?
I don't write as much as I used to for a living, but I'll give you a great example. On today, which is Thursday, on the Sherri Show, Sherri and I went to the opening of the Broadway musical, The Wiz, last night. And so nice. When I go to events like that with Sherri, we had a vacation in between working during our hiatus out in Las Vegas, where we saw a bunch of shows and ate some of the best restaurants you could eat at. I'll take and write those lived experiences into a monologue, and we incorporate them into Sherri's script. So I'm doing some limited writing on the show. I also help to look at the scripts of all the producers on the show and just kind of finesse those things. But when we were in the trial process of the show, Sherri guest hosted for 8 weeks for a previous host of a daytime show. And I literally was writing her monologues from top to bottom. So we do 18 to 21 minutes of monologue on the show. And I was sitting with Sherri for multiple hours, crafting her thoughts and writing an 18 to 21 minute monologue. It was a lot of work. It was a big undertaking. And I'm not writing that much anymore. We have a whole team of producers that really help produce her comedy monologue at the top of the show. But writing has brought things full circle to me because I have the capacity to write even when I don't have to.
Right. That's important. That's really important. And what about networking? Let's hone in on that a little bit. How did you maintain relationships? Because oftentimes the intern is overlooked. The intern's kind of in the background, but obviously you have a bubbly personality and you're very outgoing. But how did you continue to stay in touch with these people when you would see them, when they would come in town? How did you continue the relationship? For students, many of the students that I know are somewhat shy. They're afraid to approach people. So what advice would you give them?
Listen, we're all shy. Well, at least a lot of us are shy when we start out wanting to be in a business where you're having to engage with professionals and individuals who are working at a high level, have a level of notoriety, or can have the capacity to give you access to the industry that you want. And for me, I was a natural introvert. I'm a learned extrovert. I had to learn how to be an effective communicator and not appear to be shy or not appear to be to myself. And the difference between my generation, Gen X, and the millennials and the Gen Zers is that we didn't have the capacity to slide in people's DMs and use direct messages as a form of networking. We had to go to events. We had to go to conferences. We had to get on planes and pack suitcases and sometimes sneak into places where we could mix and mingle with the people who were the gatekeepers to our industry. And you had to take a deep breath and you had to rehearse what we would call your elevator pitch. What can you say in 30 seconds to intrigue somebody enough to give you access to maintain their attention? And so maybe there was an opportunity that could be fostered in that relationship. And once you did that, then you had to figure out ways to maintain those relationships so that the possibility of growing them into something could really manifest into something greater. I'm so inspired by teaching this generation how to network, and some people in general who just don't realize like their success is in their network, that I'm actually toying around with my first book idea. I've never really been inspired to write a book. People always wanted me to write a book because I was a writer and because I was in entertainment. But I always said if I did something as far as becoming a published author, I wanted it to be something that had a greater impact. And so I think networking and the art of it is the thing that will probably be the focus of the first book that I do, because I realize how essential it is for success. And so many people just don't even understand the fundamentals of how to even approach it.
Right. It's really phenomenal how, you can hone in on that and give people advice on it. The only thing that I tell students, because I know they're hungry and they need money. That's one thing students consistently across the board do and need. And I say, act like that person has got your next meal. Act like that person has got your next check. Talk to them as if, you're going to get a check based on, coming out of your shell and not being shy. And that usually is like, oh, you're hungry, you need a check. You're going to get a check if you get a chance to talk to that person. So I try to get into their psyche and tell them about that. I want to know more about how your networking led to you giving other people opportunities. I was reading your Wikipedia page, and one of the fun facts, your IMDb page, one of your fun facts was you are a connector, how you helped negotiate the deal for Sherri Shepherd on The View, how you helped bring certain people together and created almost a new segment for Ayanna Van Zant. And, those types of things. How do you take, the skill of networking to being a connector for people to create content?
Well, that's what happens when networking turns into authentic relationship. Starting with the latter story, a great friend of mine was a publicist. Her name is Danica Berry. At the time, she was working with Evelyn Lozado, who was coming off of Basketball Wives and was really going through a very tumultuous time in her life. And she really wanted people to see her differently. And I had been talking to one of the producers at Iyanla Fix My Life, which was a really popular show on the OWN network. And thinking about some of the things they were doing with the show. And I remember suggesting to Danica, the best way for people to see Evelyn in a very different light is to maybe go on this show and really sit down and acknowledge some of the behavior and some of the things that people had seen, and see if it could birth something else. Well, not only did Evelyn, being the very first celebrity to ever go into Iyanla Fix My Life, create this new wave of shows for Iyanla, where a lot of celebrities started going on that show in an effort to address their issues and see if they could, grow and evolve from them. But Evelyn ended up getting a spinoff series as a result of it. So that's just, a situation where I showed up for somebody who needed some insight, and my advice helped to create a pivot for a television show, and then a supplemental franchise for the talent who was the subject of the show. And and so that's what we need. You need your networking to really turn into relationships where there's reciprocity, where I look out for you, you look out for me, and that exchange of ideas and information then turns into something greater. It can help people turn a corner in their career. It can help people go to the next level in their career, or it might just help you when you're in a bind and just need some insight. That's what those type of relationships do, and that's the effectiveness of networking.
Okay, well, you've done things on the Travel Channel, Night Crawl, New York, Epics. I want to know what you did for the NFL Network. You've been on the Wendy Williams show. You've been on The View. You've been on all kinds of shows. You were dubbed the pop culture expert. So how do you carry all of these different bags, all of these different skills that you have? And how do you balance them? Whether you're hosting an event or doing a brand engagement, or, being the executive producer of a show, or being a pop culture expert, or, being a connector. How do you balance all of that with the responsibilities of, a daytime talk show?
Listen, we live in an entertainment circus. And so this business is all about the juggling act. It's all about trying to do all the things you can to keep multiple streams of income and to keep yourself fulfilled as a creative. I started out as a full-time writer. Writing for about 4 years opened up an opportunity for me to join the Tom Joyner Morning Show. So at the same time, I had this widely popular column, which eventually became a blog at AOL Black Voices, while being on the Tom Joyner Morning Show. I joined the Tom Joyner Morning Show as a 25-year-old. I was the youngest person to join the show at a time, and I did that for 6 years. And then I looked up in 2011 and I was burnt out. I was in my early 30s. I was doing 100,000 frequent flyer miles a year. And for those who don't understand what that means, I was pretty much gone every day, but maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday. And then I'd maybe be home to see my mom during like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Like I was always on the road, always in the air, always in a hotel. And I was burnt out. I was tired. And I realized that my backup plan, which was writing, which was the entree into the business, was taking precedent over my plan A, which was television, And so I took a year off. I lived off my savings, which means you can't be out here just balling and keeping up with the folks on Instagram who's wearing Gucci and Louis and all the other stuff, because you got to put some money away, because in the entertainment business, we have good days and we have bad days. And you need to have a reservoir for the bad days in case you go a season in this career where you aren't working. And so I lived off my savings for about a year and put a plan in place to get myself to television. And so cable news and being a talking head and a subject matter expert on cable was my entree into a more consistent TV world. That landed me talk show opportunities. It's funny enough, hosts like Wendy Williams used to watch CNN sister channel HLN and would ask for me to come on their shows. And I started meeting with various networks. I finally signed with a talent agency, and opportunity after opportunity in the TV space just started to present itself. And once I signed with my agent, she started having me meeting with all these network executives, where I started booking these odd and in cable jobs. So I met with the Travel Channel because I was working in entertainment, but I was living in Washington, D.C., which was really kind of abnormal for this business. Most people either live in New York or Los Angeles. And so, but I was always on a plane. I was living in D.C. And so Travel Channel was intrigued by me and my journey. And I hosted a special for them. And then I did a whole series. And like any time in this entertainment industry, then they had an executive shakeup. So we were preparing for the second season of my series, but the new bosses came in and didn't want to pick up the previous bosses' shows. So my show went away. And then I, went and worked out into Super Bowl in Phoenix for NFL Network. And I did this thing called NFL Fan Pass, where I would have these really cool lifestyle and culture conversations with the athletes, and we talk about everything except for sports. And they loved it, and it was great. And it was my first time at the Super Bowl. And so all of that stuff ultimately led to me getting to this place with Sherri. I was building a foundation as an on-air talent. I had 3 different network deals for shows that couldn't be sold and never saw the light of day. You know, you usually shoot these TV pilots, they shop them around. And so it was a lot of good momentum. And then the pandemic happened. And so all my good momentum began to slow down. Nobody was working. And thank goodness I had this side, multiple side gigs. One, I was doing a lot of event hosting and emceeing and panel moderating. And then the other part of it was that record companies and celebrities would hire me to teach entertainers and artists and Hollywood stars how to do interviews and how to finesse their thoughts and turn them into sound bites, how to effectively communicate. And even though we don't call it producing, it's the same thing that producers at TV shows do when celebrities come in to sit on their couch to promote movies and music and TV shows. And so those skills is one of the things that was a byproduct of my friendship with Sherri Shepherd. And Sherri would never do TV or never do appearances without me working with her and getting her ready for those platforms. And so when she got the call to guest host for the previous host, she said to me, "Hey, I will only do this if you come in and help me." And I went in and helped her, and we treated it like a 5-day pilot. And so once the interest began to become higher and heightened for her to have her own show, she came to me and said, "Listen, I'm only doing this with you. What would it take for you to walk away from everything you have going on and come on this journey with me?" And again, there was relationship, there was a professional dynamic, and there was me staying ready so I never had to get ready. All of that collided so that I could be in a position to do this opportunity with her and work on the level that I'm working on now.
Outstanding. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. That is important. All right, so we have some questions from our viewers right now. Let's see. Justin Taylor says, "What is a normal day like for you, Jawn?"
A normal day for me is not normal. But I can tell you that during the cycle of time that we are in production on a TV show, I usually wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm usually in the office by 7:30. My first meeting's at 8 a.m. And we are pulling that last aspects of the show together from like 8 to 9. And by 9:15, I'm in grooming for television. And at 10 o'clock in the morning, we're live out in New York City. And we do 5 shows a week. We work between Monday, we're in studio for the most part, Monday through Thursday. And sometimes on a Thursday night, I'm on a plane. I'm headed to a city to promote the Sherri Show, to host an event, or do some form of a gig of my own. Because even though I'm daytime's Jawn, Monday through Friday on air, my nights and my weekends are mine. And I still have an independent career that I like to maintain outside of the show. I'm always squeezing in a daily call with my mom because I am a mama's boy. And then sometimes there are events at night in the city. Last night we were out at the opening of the Wiz. Sometimes they're weekend events. There's always something going on in the entertainment industry that keeps this life fresh and ever evolving and ever moving. And so that's the basis of some of my structure when I'm in TV production cycle, but it can be a little bit different every day.
Yeah, and one time that it was different was when Vice President Kamala Harris was supposed to appear on the show. Tell the students a little bit about that and how you always have to be ready, not to get ready, because you never know when something's going to happen. Yeah,
it was a crazy day. We were excited. The Secret Service had been on our show for 5 days. They'd come in and taken down our cameras and put up their cameras. They had set up a security station in our studio, and they'd come in and been doing sweeps and protocols. And they had the people come and clean the street up. If you know anything about a New York street, sometimes they can use a little extra help. When the vice presidents come in, they give you a little extra help. So they cleaned the street up and they moved dumpsters, and it was really kind of amazing. And so the day of the show, we had to get in extra early, and we had to load the audience in extra early. And they had dogs up and down the street, and these barricades up and down the streets, and they were rolling in I think they called the magnetometers, and then you saw all the NYPD assisting the Secret Service and coordinating all these efforts. And so literally 2 hours before we were supposed to tape a show, it was going to air the next morning with the vice president, we got word that the Air Force was not going to allow her flight to take off because there was this really bad storm on the East Coast with 60 mile an hour winds and torrential rains, and all 3 of the New York airports were doing what they call a stop down. A ground stop, I'm sorry. And I had been in a couple ground stops at New York airports. New York has 3 airports, but I don't care how many airports they have. There might be times where you cannot get home because they will do a ground stop in a minute when the weather's bad and you just can't fly in it, because New York is this tiny island surrounded by water, and they don't want a situation where a plane is going to fly and the winds and the storm, rocks a plane and you end up in the Hudson River like that flight many, many years ago with Captain Sully. They've made movies and everything about that. So the Air Force would not let her flight take off because she could leave DC, but they said once she got to New York, the weather was going to be so bad that she wasn't going to be able to fly back to DC. And with the schedule that she had, it wasn't going to work. So we had 2 hours to pull together a whole show. And mind you, we had built out the entire hour around the vice president. So there was a student that was learning that they had been accepted admission into Howard University. They were getting a scholarship. The vice president's best friend from Toronto, Canada, had flown in because she had given us some photos that we could use in the interview. And she was like, I love the show. I watch it all the way in Toronto. I just want to be there. So she was there. There were AKAs and black sororities that had come in from all over the country. Everybody and their mama was sitting in this audience and ready for the vice president, only for us to have to pull together a show that did not include her. And so what we did was we kept all the elements of the show intact. And Sherri tells this story about how I came to her dressing room and gave her like a Joe Clark from Lean On Me pep talk, where I was like, you do two monologues? You gonna do 2 monologues. We're not throwing in no tape or no past celebrity interview. No, you can handle this. This is your show. We do it out. And she said, once I finished rah-rahing her, she was like, okay. And she was sitting there in like a stupor because she's a diabetic, but she had eaten a whole sleeve of Girl Scout cookies. So her blood sugar was through the roof because she stress eats. It was a day. But we were able to get the show done. We made the best of the moment, and it really became one of the shining aspects of this particular season because we were able to take lemons, turn it into lemonades, and still get a show on air, that's our objective every day. Without a guest, without a second guest, we make plans, and sometimes God remixes that thing. And our job is to be able to deliver something to the people that continues to make them better than when they came, because that's our goal every day. We do a show that we hope that makes people better than when they came.
Right. Great. Okay, Malik has a question. Can you speak to the transition from television to radio and the challenges in that process?
Yeah, so my transition was from radio to television. And so for me, the transition was there was no one who could grandfather me into television. I created my own writing career. I was able to create a newsletter that became widely popular. The timing was right. And I built it organically. And that made major institutions like AOL and others come after me and offer me paid opportunities to work. And so the Tom Joyner Morning Show approached me because I had become so popular as a journalist. And they had me come on air and do like a one-off segment to test me out. And the same day made me a firm offer to join their show as a permanent talent. But the hardest transition that I ever had was walking away from radio and writing full-time and making the transition to television, because it was the first time I began to experience a major amount of rejection in my career. My success wasn't predicated on just an opportunity I could create for myself. My success was predicated on older white men seeing the value in me and trying to figure out if putting me on their show would translate to an audience in Middle America. Because sometimes when you work in entertainment, you focus so much on the coast, what's happening in Los Angeles or what's happening in New York or what's happening in these metropolitan cities that are contemporary and progressive. But the truth of the matter is we have to factor in the Midwest. We have to factor in the South, some of these places that they call the Bible Belt or the red states, where they're just not as comfortable having a Black man in their house every day. And can you make them comfortable enough to support this particular show or endeavor so that we can begin to have success with it and make a profit, because TV's in the money business. And so that became a challenge because I got close on a lot of opportunities that seemed to be tailor-made for me, but those opportunities would ultimately either go to a former NFL star or some out-of-work boy bander, or just somebody else who had a lot more name recognition or who they thought would translate better in the markets in which they were trying to appeal. And, you pound the pavement, you stay the course. I tell everybody, if I would not have stayed the course, I would not have been in a position to have this opportunity with Sherri. Because what happens with so many people who, one, I met in high school, two, I met in college, or three, I just met along this journey. A lot of people just don't have the stamina or the capacity to stay the course in this business so that they're in position when their blessing shows up. People create bills and they have a lifestyle and they have to start taking care of babies and families and all of that type of stuff. And I made sacrifices in my personal life so that I could make sure that I was in a position for my career to align in the magnitude in which I wanted it to. And so that's what I tell people the hardest part is having to sacrifice some of the things that you see everybody else doing. Listen, if you work in a good government job and working a 9-to-5 and you're happy, that's great. If you're doing it and you're buying Gucci and Louis and you're taking internet photos and social media photos in front of your fancy car, that's great. You're working to pay bills to maintain a lifestyle. If you have a dream or a vision and you want to work in entertainment and there's not a direct path to success, but you have to stay the course to see if you can get a return on the time that you put in here, it's a little harder because you can't do the things that you see other people doing. And so you have to decide what path is best for you. Is it the pathway of the dream and the fact that I would like for it to happen in 2 or 3 years, but it might take 15. And so it means that I have to be the tortoise and not the hare. I could buy you Gucci at 45 years old and not at 25 years old. That type of thing is the thing that makes people decide if they want to stay the course in the business or leave the business. And so that for me was the hardest part. How do you continue to invest in something that you're not certain that you're going to get a return on your investment? And for me, my faith said, I put all of this time, this energy, and this sacrifice into this business. God's going to honor what I put in, and I've got to stay on the journey to make sure I'm going to get my return and reap my harvest.
That's good. That's really, really good. I love that. All right. We have a question from Nicholas that says, how would you encourage someone who's not confident into getting into networking?
Practice makes perfect. Listen, when I used to coach celebrities on having to network, or because you'd be surprised the music artists or Hollywood stars and stuff that really are passionate about their gift, but they're also not people persons. They don't know how to authentically engage. It's hard for them, and they have anxiety and things like that. And I said, become a character. Give yourself an alter ego. Find ways to create an alias identity where you can become the person that you want to be in the settings in which you have to be on, and you have to have this heightened version of yourself to engage or network and explore opportunities with other professionals. If you can't find a pathway to be able to come out of that shell, to communicate with people, to engage with people, to be able to do your elevator pitch, then your opportunities and the likelihood of you achieving your goal really is smaller, because I promise you, you can create your own opportunity. And there are lots of folks who are having success in the digital space and on social media with opportunities that they've created for themselves. Some of them go on to do amazing things like Tabitha Brown, and you work in multiple sectors and you have products and all of that type of stuff. But there are lots of digital personalities or people who create their own opportunities that once that genre changes or once that trend is over, these people go back to obscurity because they've only learned to do one thing well in its natural habitat. They've not learned to have the full scope of the business. And so the people who learn to come out of their comfort zone, the people who want a more traditional aspect of the entertainment industry, you got to learn to talk to people and engage, because that's the only pathway to get you where you want to go in this business. And you've got to find the ways to do that. And so creating these alter egos and these aliases as a pathway to communicate is often a good way to practice.
Excellent. Outstanding. Okay. Lauren says, in pop culture where there's so much messiness with like the Shade Room and other social media outlets, when working on daytime TV, producing and writing, how much truth along with research do you have to do that goes into your writing and producing, I guess, overseeing the writers and producers?
Yeah.
And how do you put out the facts while also keeping the audience glued?
Well, we're not a news show. We're an entertainment show. So we are centered in comedy and entertainment. Sherri does a 18 to 20-minute monologue at the top of the show. It's not about entertainment news. It's about a pathway to get to a joke or a laugh line. It's about a pathway for her to become Auntie Sherri, to encourage or inspire somebody. So for us, we don't dwell in those spaces because it's not a byproduct of the content that we're delivering on the show. We do sometimes use a celebrity story as a jump off point or an entryway into a joke or an entryway into Sherri telling a personal story. But because we don't foster and gossip or celebrity news in that way, it's not something that we even have to worry about. Me personally, entertainment news is how I came into the business. I was an entertainment news writer. I was an independent writer. I've worked at establishments like the New York Daily News, where I worked on one of the most powerful entertainment columns in the country prior to TMZ being an entity. And so I love entertainment news. I like to consume it. But because we live in a world where it has become very toxic, and a lot of these so-called media sites don't have the checks and balances that I had as a journalist, where they're not confirming stories with publicists and they're building whole stories off of innuendos and photos and DMs and emails. I made the choice at the top of this year that I wanted to enter 2024 just monitoring my consumption differently. And I really wanted to, this was my year of positivity and heightened positivity. So I unfollowed a lot of those websites just because for every entertaining or enlightening or informative story, sometimes there are negative stories, that they're reporting on and things like that. And for me, the overconsumption of all that became too much. So, but in our profession, no, we're the feel-good show. So we don't worry about any of that stuff. What we are, for us, it's all about the humor. It's all about the laughter. Celebrities come on our show. They love our show because it's a safe space. Our interviews are fun and informative and enlightening and empowering, and they often walk off the stage and say, I want to come back because I felt safe here. And so those are the attributes that really describe where we are and what we do at the Sherri Show. But in your personal life, you have to decide that those are the things you want to continue to consume.
Okay, great. We have some comments. Malik said, thank you for answering the question, but he also said that the Beyonce Renaissance segment last year was his favorite. And then let's see, Rebecca Bex has a question. Bex is a publicist, and she's a non-traditional student. What advice do you have for someone like her who's navigating a pivot into her next career in the industry?
So she's pivoting into publicity, or
no? She's a publicist, and now she's pivoting into broadcasting and TV.
Oh, nice. Listen, authenticity cuts through the clutter. The advice I give to anybody that wants to be in this business is to be yourself. And sometimes you have to be a heightened version of yourself, but be yourself, find what's unique to you, create a unique audience. And that will help you cut through. There's a friend of mine here in New York City who often calls me after he's on the local news here. He goes, oh, what did you think about the interview? I said, oh my God, it was really great. If you could just lose that broadcaster voice, it'd be even greater, because that's not how you talk in real life. So talk to the people like you're talking to your friends at home, so they can begin to really connect with the real you. Because if they see you in a grocery store, you're not going to be talking like this, and nobody really talks like this. So why are you delivering these news hits while talking like this? And listen, there are lots of people. There's a young lady out of Washington, D.C. She's really popular on TikTok. Her name is Jeanette Reyes. And she became social media famous for doing these funny bits in her news anchor voice. But that's not the voice she actually used when she was on the news. It was a bit. And so being authentic, being yourself, it's the thing that will allow you to cut through the clutter and begin to create a path for yourself. So that's the best advice I have for anybody. Find out who your true self is, fall in love with that person, and give us that version of yourself in this business, or at least a heightened version. Listen, I'm not always turned up with happy energy and cutting jokes and laughing as hard as I do on television. I can be a little more chill in real life. But the truth of the matter is, people meet me all the time and they say, oh my God, you're just like you are on television. I should be, because the best way for you to be able to fall in love with me is for you to meet me on camera. And I am the same person you meet in the local Trader Joe's.
Right. Do we know the same person, the anchor man? I think I know exactly who it is. All right. Side note. Okay. Camille has, she wanted to ask a question about burnout. When you burnt out when you were 25 from labor intensive and traveling and hours of operation, and how was slowing down for a year? How did it help your outlook on your personal life? And how has that year shaped your life moving back into work?
One of the things I made myself a promise of during that particular time was that I sacrificed a lot of family time in an effort to build my career. So I began to work on some balance as it pertains to that. Just being gone all the time and only being home for like Thanksgiving and Christmas, and trying to be home for my mama's birthday and maybe Mother's Day, or because they're a week apart, sometimes I choose one or the other. I began to just shift from that. Like that's not a sustainable lifestyle. And then what happens is people stop inviting you places. People are having events and functions and birthday visits, and their response to me always was, "Oh, I thought you'd probably be on the road." They were managing my schedule for me. So taking time management and really putting the balance of work in context with friends and family, that was probably one of the biggest things that came from that. The other thing was I had to teach myself to practice self-care. So after I went through that phase, not just on I used to have this ritual of on my birthday or New Year's Eve, I used to like to go to the spa. Once I took that time off from the industry or whatever, I recognized that just doing practices of self-care and making sure that I was taking care of myself all year round was essential for me not to get to a place of burnout again. Even now, like we were off 2.5 weeks from the talk show. We're just back to work this week, and we've had a lot of stuff on our slate. And so I'm counting down the days to our summer break, which comes starting May 31st. And so for me, it's just the rigorous schedule. Now, this weekend, I'll catch up with some sleep. I'll do some things to reset myself so I can start next week with a full burst of energy and a full burst of creativity. And I'm already putting plans in place of what I'm going to do that first week into our summer break so that I could just make sure I decompress and I'm taking care of myself. So that was my greatest lesson. Self-care becomes a year-round thing, and you've got to find a balance when it comes to work, striving for your profession, and the family-friend dynamic.
Yeah, you got to go to the spa more than just your birthday. You need a monthly membership at the spa. All right, we are coming.
Membership, but I'm getting in there at least every other. Okay, so I have the big spa experience here, and then I got the massage therapy experience here. So I get my massages in.
Good. Those are really important. All right, we're coming to the end, and I'm going to take one more question. Was it Micah? In the industry, you probably learn something new every day. Can you share something that you learned in your beginning years that you value now?
There's a lot. One, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. For me, I learned every aspect of this business. I wanted to be in this business so much that no matter what room you put me in, I was never going to have imposter syndrome. I was never going to feel like I didn't belong, because I was going to do the work and learn everything so that I could have enlightened conversations with the people that I wanted to call peers. The other thing is, I don't care how established you become in this business, you can always learn something. So I'm a sponge. I love to be around people who've done and accomplished things that I haven't done. I love to hear about their experience. Like when we were at the after party for the Wiz last night, I ran into one of the property brothers, Jonathan, who had just judged the season finale of a show I love on HGTV called Rock the Block. And so I could not wait to introduce myself to him and ask him about this finale. And I had some very specific questions about real estate and design and property appraisals. And because I don't really know a lot about this world, but I'm so intrigued by this competition series on HGTV and the creative aspects of how people take this blank slate and build out these multi-million-dollar homes. And so he was just telling me stuff, and it was so enlightening for me. And I could tell he was really intrigued by my enthusiasm and my excitement about learning a capacity of the business that just wasn't something that I'm really fluid in. And so you got to be open, The other thing is, honor your relationships. Listen, the worst thing in the world is to build a relationship for a person and only check in or to only reach out when you need something. That's how people ignore you. That's how they don't want to be of service or help you. You've got to have reciprocity. So for me, I'm really good about, listen, I'm busy. I maintain a robust schedule. But if I look on my phone or I'm on one of my social media apps and I can tell it's somebody's birthday, I reach out. I say, happy birthday. You know, I check if somebody crosses my mind, I send a text message and I check in with them. You know, I'm constantly in communication with people who are important to me. And that doesn't mean that you have to text or call or whatever your way of communicating is with people every day, but you just got to develop the muscle for checking in with people regularly. That could be twice a year. That could be 3 times a year. So that when you're in a situation where you might need to ask someone for a favor or an introduction or a connection, it doesn't feel like you're only reaching out because you have your hands out and you want something. So build authentic relationships, cherish them, but don't come across as that person who is the ask me person. Everything, I need to ask you something. I want to pick your brain. No, just build relationships so that when you have a request, people feel like it's a privilege to help you to facilitate that request if they have the capacity to do so.
Outstanding. Well, Jawn, we really appreciate you being here. So many comments. They love what you said. They love what you said about focusing on self-care, and also the nuggets of wisdom that you gave the students about how your journey has transpired and how you've gotten to the place where you are now. So we are very proud of you, and we thank you so much for you giving us your time. And make sure for students who are listening and paying attention that you click on that QR code and also ask your deans and ask your professors and everyone that you can ask at your university to be a part of the HBCU First Look Film Festival that's going down November 8th through 10th this year. And it went down last year and it was the bomb because apparently the Obamas were there. So who knows who's going to be there. Let's make sure that we are a part of that, and let's make sure that we support our HBCUs. Thank you so much for being with us, you guys. Take care. You have anything else you want to say, Jawn?
Go to an HBCU. And for all the kids who are at HBCUs right now, go online, go on a streaming platform, find the TV show A Different World. Find the show that inspired folks like me to want to go to HBCUs. Go see that even though this show was done like the late 80s, early 90s, see how those stories still mirror modern day life. But it is a fictitious depiction of an HBCU, but it's such a fun, informative, thought-provoking, and inspiring show. Go watch A Different World.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us, and good night. Bye.